we are in a journey of innovation. If we start from the 1900s, when was the age of manufacturing, we moved to the age of distribution in the 1960s. In the 1990s, we entered the age of information. In the 2010, we entered the age of the customer. And at this moment, we are in the age of the Internet of Things, big data, and exponential artificial intelligence that will be followed later on from the autonomous entities in a couple of decades. So innovation has followed, if we look at the last 200 years, has followed a cycle of the innovation in the periphery of the ecosystem, which means that the startups and scale-ups drive innovation. Followed from innovation is part of the corporate labs. The corporate labs drive innovation, and then is followed again from the startups and scale-ups. And at this moment, we are in this stage where the startups and scale-ups drive innovation. And because of this, corporates are very much interested in startups and scale-ups. That's why you see a lot of acquisitions that is happening from big companies like Apple, Amazon, Google. They acquire a startup every 1 or 2 weeks. You don't hear much, but that's what's happening. Andrea, can we go to the next one? Then, so various innovation methods as an introduction. You can have innovation as organic. That's what the corporates did in the past, and they still do. You can acquire external competencies through acquisitions. That's what we said. Apple, Google, and Amazon acquire a startup every month or sometimes even every 2 weeks. Partner with external startups like GE has done with Kaggle. Invest in startups that are doing what you want to do. Bring startup veterans and project team members into the organization to shift the culture from the inside. This doesn't happen very often, but it's also a way grow startups organically through incubators within the corporate world, or through CVCs. And there are also other options that you are going to hear during the discussion today. That's the introduction, what you are going to hear today, and many more things from the panelists. Now we go to the next page. Here are our panelists. I would like to invite each of them to present themselves in a couple of minutes. Patrick, would you like to start first? Thank you.
Certainly, Mike. So my name's Padraig Walsh. I'm a partner in the corporate team here at Tanner DeWitt, which is an independent, one of the larger independent law firms in Hong Kong. My practice is focused on, well, all things related to technology, really, not necessarily with solely and exclusively within the technology sector, but more how businesses of all stripes and colors interact with technology and the legal issues that arise. So a lot of that work is also focused on businesses that are growing, that are focused on the development and deployment of technology, that are growing and scaling quickly, including to exit. So that's the core of the topic that I would like to be addressing in the course of the rest of this particular session with Mike.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Jean, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Pasternak. I'm currently working with a few startups that I have personally invested in, but I've been actually spending the last 20 years around M&A and venture capital and innovation team in a very large corporation, mostly Schneider Electric. And I will be happy to share the learnings from both sides of the equation. I've been an acquirer, and I'm now more in the range of a prey. So happy to share with everyone on this topic, and feel free to ask further questions if I'm not clear or not addressing the topics that everyone online has in mind.
Thank you, Jean. JC, would you like to go next?
Hello, so my name is Junao Choi. You can call me JC if that's a little bit easier for you. So I started out my career as a consultant back in the US. Then I went back into academia and then got a degree in social network analysis, and then came out here to work for HKUST as a tenure-line professor. A few years ago, after spending a little bit extra time teaching at Stanford as well as NYU branch campuses, I went part-time as an academic, and now I'm full-time as an entrepreneur. My company is called Zector. We're in the market research space, and of course, we're using machine learning and other technologies to automate as much of the market research process as possible. And I'm probably the least experienced person in terms of M&As in this panel. And this is actually my first startup that actually has gotten to a point where it's actually even reasonable to start talking about this kind of subject. So I see my role in this panel as offering some expertise where appropriate, and also maybe like a member of the audience on the panel. In other words, I have a lot to learn myself, and I'm really looking forward to this and learning from the other distinguished panelists as well as the moderator. So thank you very much for the invitation, and back to you, Mike.
Thank you, JC. Thanks a lot. So as far as concerned myself, a few words for people that don't know me. I have been about 22 years with corporates, Philips and Siemens, as a CEO of global business units mainly, and I have about another 15 years experience with startups, starting, helping them to scale, helping other startups to scale. So that's what we do the last 15 years. So I have seen both equations, both worlds, the corporate and the startup scale-up worlds. And in this capacity, I'm here to transfer some of my knowledge together with this excellent panelists. I would like to, Andrea, let's continue explaining a little bit about NX2, and then we go to the questions. Andrea.
Sure, thank you, Mike, and thank you to Jean Padray and JC for being here. 10x2 is a management consulting company. We are based in several countries in Asia Pacific and in Europe, and we work with both corporates and startups for innovation. We help, we enable and assist startups in scaling up faster and with less risk, and we hold hands to corporates to help them onboard, partner and onboard with startups. So we enable growth of the entire ecosystems. In Asia Pacific, we're present in Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, India, Indonesia, mainland China. And in Europe, we have partners in Western Europe, the European Union, in Germany and the Netherlands. One of our core drivers, beyond our knowledge and expertise of both startups and corporates, is sustainability. We work with startups and corporates that focus on at least one of the sustainable development goals. We see these goals not just as impact or social contribution, we see them as real growth drivers of the coming decade and more. Goals like clean energy, health and well-being for all, zero hunger, and of course, climate action are really more and more driving growth and objectives of corporates and societies worldwide. To tell you something, just a small one, a single action. At the start of last year, BlackRock, the world largest global asset manager, announced that they are starting to restructure all of their asset management portfolios to be sustainability integrated, and that is trillions of investments, not billions, but trillions. And this is changing all investments in all corporates, and that is making changes into the corporates themselves at a very high level. So this is where growth, this is a major factor for growth, and it is already incorporated in our view of the world. With this, let me just a couple of reminders for logistics. Please ask questions in the Q&A and not in the chat, in the Q&A, and they will all be answered either by me in text or by Mike and the panelist by voice. We will forward them to at the right point in the structure of the conversation today. And of course, at any time, feel free to make comments in the chat, particularly later when we have polls and you might want to add additional comments. With this, I'm handing it back to Mike and the panelists, and please enjoy today's webinar.
Thank you, Andrea. Very good. So can we go to the first question? Why M&A? Why do startups and especially scale-ups choose for an exit with a strategic partner? I would like to make a quick introduction before you answer this question. Normally, a startup in an early stage, they don't think about exit. But when you start growing and the growth especially is accelerating, then in what we call the scale-up stage, then the scale-up start to think about exit. Although some of them, they plan it from the beginning, I call it, but not many. So this question is mainly for scale-ups, but there are also exceptions for startups. So why M&A for startups and scale-ups? Any of the panelists would like to answer this question? Let's go ahead. Patrick, maybe you can start if you want.
Yeah, maybe I'll start on that, Mike. I mean, the reason why M&A is chosen is because it is the natural exit for businesses in more than 90% of the cases. So in that sense, it is the exit that is most likely. And preparing yourself for that is a natural thing that a scaling business should do. I'd like to come back to something that you actually said at the introduction, Mike, which is that at the startup stage, many businesses don't think about what their exit might be. And I think that's a fundamental flaw and an error, because I think at the earliest that you are able to identify what your ultimate objective is and how you're going to achieve that target, well, that creates the path to that particular exit. If you start on a venture and in the back of your mind is something like, we're going to conquer the world, well, that's so open-ended, so diffuse, you may as well have no target at all. Now, it also helps in terms of defining what it is the objective of the entrepreneur is on that journey. Because if the objective is to build a sustainable business, sustainable in the sense of what used to be called in the old days, a good old-fashioned, medium-sized enterprise or medium-sized business that created good, stable revenues for the people who own that business. If that's what your objective is, then there's a particular path you follow for that. If there's a path where you say, as a true entrepreneur would, I'm in this business in order to build it, grow it, sell it, and recycle, then that's a very, very different journey. And the sooner that's identified and the sooner you can build that into your business model, the sooner you can identify the particular businesses that you're identifying as people who may be interested in buying you. And the sooner that you can, wear the pretty clothes and the nice colors and all of that to attract their attention. So all of that, I think, the earlier you start on the journey to identifying what your exit is, the more likely you're going to build your business in a way to close out on that within a time frame that is, which is reasonable.
Thank you very much. Zan, what is your takeaway from this question?
I would say very abruptly, first, I agree with Patrick said, the clearer the exit views, the better for orienting the discussion of the next step. But very clearly and very pragmatically, people who are entrepreneurs and who think of M&A, they don't think of M&A for further innovation. They think M&A for exiting and thinking they have already leveraged what they could do as an entrepreneur within the startup or the scale-up. So very clearly, M&A in an exit strategy is for money, not for innovation. I think we should all be quite clear around it. Now, if you dig a bit further, because the money question is always an easy answer, everything has a price, as is often said. It's very important, as Patrick said, to say why they would consider M&A as an exit, and M&A as an exit makes sense indeed for the money, but there are other ways to get your money. It's really about, I think, a limitation where I, as an entrepreneur, and my team, the people who are currently driving the business, think we're reaching a limit. It might be a glass ceiling, it can be a competency ceiling, it can be a managerial limitation of skills. But at the end of the day, what really matters is considering that it's the end of a cycle for some key elements which are going to be the weakness of the future for further scale up. And that's where the innovation topic is back in the loop. You will not have this innovation because of some weaknesses, which are sometimes capital, but it's not the main one, that should push entrepreneurs to consider an M&A exit.
Thank you. JC, any takeaway from you?
So I'm on the same page as both Padraig and John. As an entrepreneur and as the founder of a company that's just now reasonable to talk about something like that, but we're still a bit early for this. I think there's a calculus here. And the calculus is risk versus reward, right? You want to push your company as far as you can reasonably get without encouraging huge risks in terms of you want to get as far as you can before you look at an acquisition. And as Padraig was saying, for most companies, exit equals an M&A. Very few companies IPO, and there's a much larger class of startups that end up becoming the proverbial lifestyle company. In other words, the companies that end up being small to medium-sized enterprises, it actually ends up being a good lifestyle for the founders and employment for the employees, but it's not going to be something that's going to be worth a lot of money. So from my point of view, I think I'm actually with what the previous panelists have said. At which point is going to become more and more difficult for you to drive growth as a founder, right? Maybe you don't have the team, maybe you don't have the capital, maybe the sales reach just isn't what you can actually generate as a startup. But you're much more valuable to a large organization than you are to actually yourselves. At that point, I think is when you would start thinking about M&A. That's just from the entrepreneur's point of view.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was a great introduction. I hope this can generate maybe some questions from the participants. And we go to the next question, which is about evaluation. So what considerations would you give other startup scale-ups who are considering an exit with a strategic buyer? There are many considerations if you could choose the top 2 or top 3 that you would like the startup scale-ups especially to consider when they want to do an exit with a strategic buyer. I think that's more a valuable contribution to the participants to understand what they need to pay attention to. Who would like to go first? Please choose. You don't need to. Anyone.
I'll start and be a bit provocative. I would say not giving what should be the evaluation, but thinking like JC said, it's a risk-benefit evaluation. So the idea is it's going to be a wedding, but it's not going to be a wedding of equal. M&A is of course the main topic, but even if you go for alternative schemes as a JV or whatever, you really need to see the evaluation of the deal as I'm not going to be the boss anymore. But I'm still, at this point of the discussion, probably the one, and I mean, when I mean the founding team, the leadership in the startup, the best one to assess according to the strategic intent that Padraig mentioned before, on that path, on that vision, where am I to reach it? And if I can feel there is no way I can with the assets I have in my possession, then you get into what JC mentioned and say, okay, it's a matter of risk benefits. We are not going to reach that vision. And it's the peak of the value we can get from this venture right now. So it's the time to pass it over. But without the dream of it's going to go in the same way, because that is the pitfall. And I would say in the evaluation, you need to be already considering that it's going to be a change.
You. Who would like to go next?
So I would maybe make three quick points. First, in relation to, you might say, the deal strategy, which is, don't think in respect of there being one strategic investor that you're looking to interest, but make sure that you've got some options. So ideally, you might be within a pretty narrow scope in respect of the market that you're in, but if you're able to identify a couple of potential suitors and go through a proper process in respect of getting, proposals from them through a proper process, usually with, people like 10x2, for instance, to guide you through that process. That's invaluable, because then you will have different proposals that you'll be able to compare and contrast, and also you'll be introduced to different people to have a sense of what might work best for you in respect of not just the acquisition itself, but after the acquisition. The second point is that think beyond completion of the exit itself, and think in terms of what you as a founding team are thinking about in relation to what you hope for this exit to achieve. If it's a situation where you believe that you've exhausted not only the possibilities of growing the business further, but also exhausted your own energy, so to speak, and you're looking at this as a complete exit, that is going to have a particular structure that you'll look for in the M&A transaction itself. But more likely, the business that is buying you will want the leadership team to remain in place, and will want the leadership team to continue at least for a spell of time, and sometimes for longer than that. And you need to be aware of that the arrangement in question doesn't stop with the exit itself, that normally there is a form of integration, a whole new set of issues that will follow after the exit has occurred.
Thank you. Very good. JC, anything to add here?
I don't have very much experience with this.
Okay.
So I'm just listening and learning.
No problem. So I will add something here. For the evaluation, a few more points to pay attention. Although as a startup or scale up, when a corporate is interested about you, or you are interested to go with a corporate, it's very enticing, and you would like to make the deal because you want to make money, because you want to grow your business. It's very, very important to take into account that the corporate in concern has the right business model to be able to support you. There are corporates that they want to expand to another segment with a new business model. That's why they are interested about you. But if you enter their world, if you are not strong enough, you might be completely absorbed and even die, and your dream can become non-reality, right? It's gonna be a disaster at the end of the day. So that's one thing that you need to pay a lot of attention, and I will mention more on the way forward. But that's one thing that I wanted to mention. It's very, very important that there is complementarity between the startup and the corporate world, the corporation.